Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining. Glad you're in two-way with me and community. We're going to talk about what's happened today. There's some things moving around right now, which we'll get to. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. Many new people I can see. Grateful for you to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the platform. If you're watching here on two-way, thank you for joining. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, please raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Anybody can raise their hand to be part of the conversation. We'll always want you to say where you're located, who you're supporting for president, if you're voting in the election, and what's on your mind. But as always, this is a platform for learning, for peace, love, and understanding, for the extension of the presumption of grace. So every day I hear from people, they say, I liked it before, but now it's too pro-Trump. You just hear from pro-Trump people, I've lost interest in your platform. Or they say, it's too pro-Harris. I like Trump and your platform's too anti-Trump. Well, neither is true. Now, there's some episodes, unfortunately, that sometimes just luck of the draw, one side gets a little bit more to say. But I'll remind you, the whole point of this platform is to learn from Americans who don't think like you. So if you're a Trump person and there's an episode that's heavy on Harris people, that should be a good episode for you. You shouldn't want, if you want to just hear pro-Trump stuff, there's other places you can go. The point of coming here is to listen to a civilized conversation about what the other side thinks, to share ideas, not necessarily to convince anybody of anything, but to understand what they're thinking. So I say again, if you're here and you're looking for every episode to be pro-Trump or pro-Harris, or every episode to be perfectly balanced, I can't help you. But if what you want is to learn and see and understand the 360 degrees of what's going on in America, in our politics, in our culture, in our political culture, I'd say there's a pretty good place to come. So you're welcome to keep sending me an email saying it's too pro-Trump or too pro-Harris. It won't be true, no matter how many times you send them. And I'll say again, if you're pro-Trump, you should welcome episodes that have a lot of Harris voices, because that's probably the best exposure you're going to get to that point of view. All right. So both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump were out and about today. So I'll run through to you what they did in public. There's some battleground state polling we'll talk about. There's a new Trump campaign video that's all about Grandpa Donald that we'll look at, and people can decide if they think it's good or funny or whatever you want to say about it. We're going to start by, as we wait for the release of some polls that were just teased on Fox, there's a new New York Times story about the most important topic in some ways, which is the economy. And it's got a rare interview with David Plouffe, one of the strategists for the campaign, who says correctly and backed up by Republican strategists and pollsters quoted in the story that yes, Harris has, as we all know, closed the gap on who do you trust more in the economy. Where she's also, according to the Democrats' own data, where she's ahead is who cares more about people like you? And obviously those questions are closely related. If Harris loses narrowly on the economy, but wins on cares about people like you, I think it's safe to say back in the envelope that would position her to actually win the election. But there's also no doubt that it's not just John Fedoritz and me carping here from the Upper West Side. There's no doubt that a lot of swing state undecided voters continue, even after yesterday's speech and interview, to wonder where Kamala Harris is on the question of the economy. So we'll continue to track all that for sure. But I recommend the New York Times story to you. It's interesting. Now, today, Vice President at that White House did a couple of things, public events. She met with President Zelenskyy and did a photo op with him and made some remarks. We'll listen to that in a moment. And she also did something which is either just ended or is still going on, which is an event with President Biden at the White House on guns in the East Room. But let's start by listening to the Vice President with President Zelenskyy at the White House today.
As I have made clear on our 6 previous meetings and throughout Putin's brutal aggression and war against Ukraine, my support for the people of Ukraine is unwavering. I've been proud to stand with Ukraine. I will continue to stand with Ukraine, and I will work to ensure Ukraine prevails in this war. To be safe, secure, and prosperous, the United States must continue to fulfill our long-standing role of global leadership. We must stand with our allies and our partners We must defend our democratic values and stand up to aggressors. And we must stand for international order, rules, and norms. Each one of these principles is at stake in Ukraine. And that is why Ukraine's fight matters to the people of America. The Ukrainian people are bravely defending their homes and their homeland, their freedom and their democracy against a brutal dictator. And the American people know well the meaning of freedom, of independence, and the importance of rule of law. These ideals are central to who we are as Americans. And some of the most important moments in our history have come when we stood up to aggressors like Putin, just as we must today. Indeed, standing with our friends and defending our ideals against tyranny has helped make America the most powerful and prosperous nation in the world. Putin's aggression is not only an attack on the people.
So there are the Fox polls. Take those down for just a second. I'll just say on the vice president, a little bit under the radar because vice presidents don't get covered very much. She's done a ton of world travel, met with a ton of world leaders, both at home and abroad. And everybody can have their own point of view about whether she's effective there. I think she's learned how to do that thing, the bilateral, statements. And I thought her presentation there was very good and very confident. And again, I don't know if you want to call it a paradox, ironic, or just interesting, you pick. The White House from the earliest days made a very strong effort to make sure that she had a lot of experience meeting with foreign leaders, going to international conferences, giving high profile addresses. And I think it's paid off. And in some ways, she's advanced more there than with more confidence in some ways than she has on domestic issues, which is obviously a flip from where she started. As I said, second thing she did, gun event going on now. We'll talk about that. Let's look at the polls. 2 Fox polls, 2 battleground states, and it's a mixed result. Again, we're still dealing with margin of error stuff, but identical 51-48, Harris with the edge in Georgia, Trump with the edge in Arizona. Arizona, according to my sources, is of the 7 viewed by many now in both Republican and Democratic circles as the strongest of the 7 states for Trump. Okay. Georgia's considered either the 3rd or 4th or second. Some people have it second, some have it third, some have it fourth. If you take these results at face value, I'd say the totality of both these polls good for Harris, because Trump almost certainly needs to win both Arizona and Georgia to win. Harris over 51 in Georgia, not a great sign for him, but it's still a state that most people think will eventually trend back to Trump. So there are those 2 polls for you. Again, Fox News, Arizona, and Georgia. Donald Trump, late in the day, they announced he was doing not a press conference, but a statement to the press at Trump Tower. They didn't say what it was about. There was a lot of speculation that he might talk about his legal issues because there was a proceeding today on his civil case. The Trump people definitely like irony because the last 3 events at Trump Tower before today were advertised as press conferences, and he took no questions. Today, they advertised it as a statement to the press, and guess what? He took questions. So I didn't go because I didn't want to stand there for another no question thing. My general rule, if someone who might get elected president is doing an event within 2 miles of my home, I should go. Just seems like a good rule. But I didn't go because getting in Trump Tower these days is a mess, particularly during the UN meeting. He spoke mostly about immigration, although you'll be surprised to hear he had digressions. The Trump campaign has been putting him very purposely in set pieces devoted to a single topic, with the hope that he'll stay mostly focused on that single topic. And he's done better in the last couple of weeks than the norm for him. He stayed mostly on immigration, and you won't be surprised. We're not playing any of the sound because it was just his normal critique of the Biden-Harris record on immigration. You won't be surprised to hear he said she was named the border czar. And it was, I think, meant to kind of get ahead of all the stories tomorrow. We don't really know what her event in Douglas, Arizona will look like tomorrow. Certainly, I think or whatever she says about immigration will be rhyme with what she said in the debate to talk about her time as a prosecutor, to talk about Trump's role in killing the bipartisan piece of legislation that had no chance to pass the House, but was going to potentially get through the Senate. In any event, he then took questions, and the questions were on a range of topics. Again, I think the two most interesting things that I heard, one was he announced that President Zelensky's coming north tomorrow from D.C. to visit him at Trump Tower. So there'll be a meeting there, and I suspect a photo op. And of course, their relationship, I'd say, is fraught. That may be a good word to describe their relationship. It's fraught. So that'll be interesting to see. He also was asked about Mayor Adams, and he took the opportunity to take a shot at Mayor de Blasio, but he also kind of took a little shot at the prosecution and basically echoed Mayor Adams' suggestion that the reason he was under legal peril was because he had crossed people who were powerful. Some people looked at the indictment that was unsealed earlier today and felt it was not overwhelming. I would say to you, based on what I know, don't think that that's necessarily the last set of charges the mayor will face. And much difference of opinion in my world, New York City political people, about whether Adams will be in office much longer. I think it'll be very brief time before he's out. Some people think he'll survive for quite some time, and a lot of speculation about who will run and who will win if there is a special election. Shortly before we came on, a federal grand jury has indicted multiple Iranians on charges related to the hacking of the Trump campaign. That's a story that's been percolating out there for a while. I doubt those people will ever stand trial, but somehow they've put together enough evidence for a grand jury to indict them. And then lastly, we talk all the time about Kamala Harris and her image and projections of strength and confidence on the economy, et cetera. One of the things we've talked about here is Donald Trump so well known that there's really no image crafting the campaign can do to get people to think anew about him or more warmly about him. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, and we've showed some of that here, the hamburgers, the grocer, the local grocer in Pennsylvania, where he gave the woman $100. We've seen obvious efforts documented by his campaign and others to, in one of my favorite words, but many people say their least favorite words in politics, humanize him. And one of the things we've talked about here, and I hope they didn't get the idea from us because that would be awkward, is his granddaughter at the convention telling stories about him that seemed very effective and very personal, and a side of him that we hadn't seen. I've previously told my story about Donald Trump and grandchildren. I won't tell it again here because too many of you have already heard it, but he's not previously been a big proponent of showing his grandpa's side. But watch the campaign video.
My name is Kai Madison Trump. I'm speaking today to share the side of my grandpa that people don't often see. To me, he's just a normal grandpa. He always wants to know how we're doing in school. He always encourages me to push myself to be the most successful person I can be. I was shocked when I heard that he has been shot, and I just wanted to know if he was okay. It was heartbreaking that someone would do that to another person. A lot of people have put my grandpa through hell, and he's still standing. The media makes my grandpa seem like a different person, but I know him for who he is. He's very caring and loving, and he will fight every single day to make America great again.
Make America great again.
Grandpa, you are such an inspiration, and I love you.
Vote for Grandpa.
All right, so I'm sure everyone has views about that. The first person whose views I want on that is someone who secretly calls Donald Trump grandpa behind his back, or sometimes calls him the boss. 100% for the big guy. Hogan, that is a good shirt. Hogan Gidley, who a senior official in the Trump administration, senior-ish, maybe mid-level. Hogan, what? I want to ask you about the polls.
The top, man.
I want to ask you about the polls. I want to ask you about that video. I want to ask you about a bunch of stuff. But let's start with the video. Lauren Leader here also. What do you think of that video? And please pay special attention to the sacrilegious use of a Beatles song.
I love videos like that of him because I've seen him in those situations so many times. And anyone who knows him will tell you, if you could just get people near him in those situations, he's just so incredibly charming. He's so funny. He's so loving to his family and to his friends. It's just one of those things you wish you could see more of. But as you mentioned, a lot of times he doesn't like that. I was with him. I've been with him twice in the last little bit here. The day the second assassination attempt happened at Mar-a-Lago, I was at the club waiting to meet with him. And then another time recently here in DC, when he was speaking to a pro-Jewish group here. And that type of personality you see in that video is exactly what I get to experience every time I'm on the phone with him, every time I talk to him. But real quickly, you mentioned the polls at the outset. Something I found interesting. I was looking back at some of these numbers too.
Hold on, Hogan. Hold on on the polls. Hold on the
Okay.
polls. I want to hear from others on the video, but I want to ask you one quick reply on the video, which is, I get the sentiment. It's like the third straight Trump campaign video we've looked at, which was edited to me in a very unprofessional way. And I know maybe they're going for like a Blair Witch Project, like super cash, but why are the edits so bad in these videos? Are they not taking time? Do they not care? I could edit better and I don't know how to edit.
I was a television reporter, so I do know how to edit. I don't know necessarily anyone really cares. I don't know if it's that jarring. I mean, my gosh, we mocked a lot of the Biden stuff, the TikTok style. It was just like
yeah.
a bunch of edits in a 7-second time frame. Obviously, Kamala Harris stuff was all edited when she meets with reporters too. So I understand the argument for edits. I don't think it matters in this particular instance.
All right, COVID has certainly lowered everybody's expectations about video. To wit, we let you come on this show wearing a T-shirt. All right, we have Ray, Dan, Lauren, and Nancy all here. If you don't know who they are, Google them. But they're all
you're wearing a T-shirt.
I am too. It's same deal.
I'm in a sweatshirt.
This program is come as you are. I laugh when people say agree to come on two-way and they say, "What should I wear?" I say, "Come as you are, whatever you're comfortable in." All right, let's just start. Thank you all for joining. Just give me like a sentence or two. What do you think of the grandpa video, Ray?
I think it would have been great if he hadn't spent the last 8 years being Trump.
All right, Nancy.
I'm going to say the same thing. We're so used to seeing another sort of Donald Trump that when this kind of flies in from the sign, it's like, yeah, maybe it's just not. You may be right that he's like this with his family, but it's kind of hard for me to buy it.
Yeah, I will say there's two kinds of Americans, right? There are people who spend time with Donald Trump and people who haven't. And if you spend time with Donald Trump, you would have almost invariably, even if he's ripped you off in a construction project, the same position that Hillary Clinton had. I quote this all the time when she was asked, why did you go to Donald Trump's wedding to Marla Maples? And she said, because he's fun to be around. He just is. And his grandkids agree. But as others, as Ray just said, as Nancy sort of echoed, not as fun to be around when he's attacking immigrants. Dan, what do you think of the grandpa video?
I'll just say, as a Democratic fundraiser for 10 years, I actually took clients to meet with him, and I can concur. He's very charming in person. I thought it was a great video. I mean, anytime you're trying to humanize him, it's great. And just as, Kamala Harris is giving economic speeches because people don't trust her on the economy, undecided voters have issues with him personally, and anything that makes them look at him a little anew or a little softer is good for Trump. I think it's a good video.
Yeah. I don't love Here Comes the Sun while his granddaughter's talking about it's being shot at. That's a little jarring for me. Lauren, what do you think of the video?
I'm counting down till the Beatles estate sues, like basically everybody else who has ever had their music played in a Trump video or rally. So maybe he's counting on many of the Beatles being dead for that to be. Anyway, Ringo Starr's playing at Radio City tonight, so we'll see if they catch wise to that. Yeah. But look, same thing. I mean, I think it's just, I don't know how you redefine the person who everybody, feels they know already. And the other thing is, about that you mentioned Hillary. People said this like crazy in 2016. If you could just put Hillary in every person's living room, they would feel differently about her. And you say that about every candidate. It doesn't matter. What the public perceives on television, on the airwaves, is what gets people elected or not. From Nixon forward, since there's been television in politics, who people are in private has very little influence, and every politician is charismatic and loves their family. So, but yeah. And I also agree with you, a little junky on the edits, not not
it just, I don't know, it just could be nicer. All right, let's put the Fox polls back up. We got slightly nicer graphics than we did previously. You can leave everybody up. You don't need to put full screen, but just put them up so people can see them there in that box. Hogan will go around the same order, round robin there. Harris ahead. So this is Arizona. Harris was up by one. Now she's down two. That tracks with private polling just in terms of the trend. But again, it's one poll. Let's not say Arizona's over, but that's Arizona.
Yeah.
And then do we have the same graphic? There's Georgia, and we don't have the change, but there's Harris up 3 in Georgia. Again, go around. You can comment on the Fox polls or where you think that things are trending, whatever you want to say, or you can pass. Hogan, you first.
Yeah, look, I'd much rather be where Trump is now than where he was in any of the 2 previous elections. And I'll give you these numbers real quick. Same day in 2016, his Real Clear Politics average was 44.3. He finished 3 points better than that on election day. Same day in 2020, he was 43% in Real Clear and finished 4 points higher. So 47 in both. Today, he sits 47.2 in Real Clear Politics. So if he's underperforming by 3, you could see him above 50%. So I'm looking at a lot of different numbers. This is going to be razor thin up until the moment we call the thing. Yeah. So I'm not celebrating.
Hogan, what if pollsters have figured out how to poll better, and the comparison to the 2 previous cycles is apples to tangerines?
Well, I mean, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that's not responsive, but okay. Ray, where are you on the polls? If you have a point of view.
Yeah, I actually like where Trump is. I don't think that Harris is going to win Georgia based on several things. One, Biden only won by 11,000 votes, and they really had to pull up all the stops on that. I think the only thing that might be able to help Harris going forward, and we've talked about this before, is the stuff that's emanating out of Springfield, Ohio, is now really beginning to take a different turn. For example, there was a story that the mayor of Springfield, who's a Republican, told J.D. Vance he wouldn't talk to him. And I spoke to a friend of mine yesterday who was a very high-ranking Republican, and yes, I do have Republican friends, who also just talked to me a lot about what he's hearing and about how people are so disappointed, even more disappointed about what's happening on there. So the short of it is, if I'm Trump, I'm happy where I'm in. I don't think Harris is going to win Georgia, but I do think that the Springfield stuff might begin to have some sort of.
Okay, Nancy.
I was in communication today with a former editor of mine who now lives in Phoenix, and he's sort of like a lot of people I know. He doesn't really want to vote for either candidate, but he said that he is going to vote for Harris because it is so close. And his words were because he feels Trump is such a menace. So people that maybe really don't want to vote for either of them, if they're in Georgia or Arizona, they're going to go vote.
Yeah, I have to say menace is the nicest word anyone's used about Trump on this in a while. So there you go. Jan?
That's the first poll out of Georgia that I've seen Harris in the lead. So I'm a little skeptical. I mean, it is an outlier right now. You said earlier, everything I'm hearing in Arizona, it is, I think, it's not safely Trump, but it is leaning towards Trump. And it's hard to see Trump getting 45-50% of the Latino vote and Harris winning, frankly, Arizona or Nevada. She would have to really overperform, with working class whites. It may happen, but I haven't seen any data yet. So, I continue to think it's really for her. It's North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And to Hogan's point, they are razor tight.
Yeah. Lauren.
I have a lot of questions about the ongoing fluctuation of Arizona numbers for a couple of reasons, because the polls are consistently showing Ruben Gallego with a massive lead over Kari Lake. And I find it very hard to believe, especially in a year with an abortion ballot amendment on the ballot in Arizona, that voters are going to literally crisscross the ballot like crazy, go Gallego, Trump, abortion, yes, and somehow Harris is going to lose. So I think the numbers have been a little weird, and it's a strange race in Arizona. So I'm waiting to watch and see. And Georgia, I actually think she has the potential to outperform in Georgia, despite what some of this is looking like, in part because the voter mobilization operation there is massive. Also, we need to remember big Indian American community in DeKalb County in Georgia. They are mobilizing like mad around her. They've not always voted consistently Democrat, but they're very motivated for her. So I think there's some interesting sleepers. And then last thing I just wanted to say about Hogan, one thing to remember about 16, and I got a really interesting insight from Hillary Clinton this week. 16, we had a massive October surprise with the Comey announcement. Speaking of the Iranians, Hillary said at CGI this week that she's confident that given the ongoing interference of both the Iranians and the Russians online, that there may be also another massive October surprise of some kind that comes down that could really throw a lot of chaos into the election. So
it may be so baked. It may be so baked, as Mark said at the beginning, that it's going to take an external force to tip it one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm not sure the October surprises even have the same effect that they did in 16. So because people have sort of seen and heard it all, there's such a
voted.
And they were correct.
Yeah, I agree that the Russians and the Iranians and the Chinese are just a huge October factor, because it's so easy now, not just because of AI, but because there's so many more platforms. And on the question of the Arizona Senate race, it's such a weird pair of candidates, because he is like so liberal. He would be the most liberal person elected statewide in Arizona in our lifetimes, I think, by a lot. And she's who she is, and
totally
has so many Republicans turned off. So it's like he has done a great job of focusing on his military record. She's done a horrible job of calling out how liberal he is. But if they decide to invest there and they get that out, then I think that race can get closer. And again, he's got a lot of the focus has largely been on her problems. He has a lot of problems too. All right, let's bring folks in. As always, tell us who you are, where you're from, what's on your mind. Daniel, come on in. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Mark. I'm calling from North Carolina. I didn't want to skip over the clip you showed at the start from the vice president, which I had not seen, with her speaking beside Zelenskyy, and I found very effective. And
I did too.
And so this is an issue that speaks to me. I support her view as articulated on the Ukraine, but it's very rare that you get such a clear difference between two candidates on a foreign policy issue. They say that every election, but it's very rare that there's actually one issue in which they are diametrically opposed. Trump could never have had that press conference. Now, inconceivable.
Well, he's meeting with Zelenskyy tomorrow, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if he'll come out and say anything that was. But my question is, okay, it appeals to me. So what? The question is I would be very interested. Is this meaningful for the election, or is this just something that's not going to move anybody on either side, and those things are set?
I actually wonder if it may move some people towards Trump. I agree with you. I thought Harris looked great. Personally think it's important to support Ukraine. I don't think a lot of voters see it similarly. It's money out the door that could be spent domestically. It's, their kids don't want to do, don't send any more troops overseas. I know no one's talking about sending troops to Ukraine, but I think whether it's in Israel or Ukraine, more people are with Trump to look inward than to look outward. That's just
for her, she's got this constant bar of being presidential. And I think that you can't underestimate why standing next to world leaders and being confident continues to be important for her, because she is female and, she has been accused of not being experienced and not having enough, depth and all of those things. So every single time she does that, whether or not people agree with her on the substance, that those visuals matter to them. And I think they do matter to people. I don't think she shifts voters, but it keeps the sense that she's competent, presidential, et cetera, in the fore.
All right, Dan, thank you. As always, Susie, come on in. Tell folks where you are. That's a great A-frame, who you're supporting, what's on your mind.
I am in Madison, Wisconsin, and I happen to be in northern Wisconsin right now. And I supported Trump in 16, both and we'll support him again in 2024. And my surrounding polls, the polls are both from a Democrat, Republican, and independent, as well as gender-based. Because I feel like there might be some game those that I'm that make me quite accurate.
Susie, you're cutting out a little bit. Are you just asking about the accuracy of the polls, just like as a general matter? All right. This is always a good topic. Susie, do you think if the polls are inaccurate, it's because they're done by people with a partisan agenda, or they're incompetent? What would your guess be about why they'd be wrong?
Curious about is the can you?
You're coming in and out, unfortunately.
Between
now you're just at yeah. Go ahead now. Go ahead. Try now. Go ahead. No, try them without. Try without. You were good for a second there. Take them out. Let them untoggle.
Can you hear me? No.
Yes. Now start right. Susie, start over. You said something about Wisconsin. Just kidding. Ask your question about the polls.
So I'm most interested in understanding the difference between gender in the polling, because I feel like women are for Harris, more men are for Trump. And if there are more women in the polls, that's going to skew the results. And I get both emails from both candidates, and I'm getting a lot of emails from Harris right now asking for money because she's losing in Georgia. She's losing in basically all the Sunbelt states. And so help me understand the validity of the polls.
On the lady stuff,
Susie,
that's like my topic. I live in this, so I can take that one.
Susie, let me just ask you a couple questions, and Lauren's going to take that. But you said you voted for Trump twice. You're voting for him again. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. If you are, who do you think is going to win right now?
Well, I hope Trump, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I think
not
everything.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
If he called you and asked you for advice about how to win, what would be the main advice you'd give him?
Stay on topic, stop rambling. I watched the little spiel he gave this afternoon and was hoping he would stay on topic, and felt like he was all over the board. I don't need to hear about all the extraneous things that have nothing to do with policy.
And then last question to you about this is, what do you find most appealing about the prospect of Kamala Harris being president?
Absolutely nothing. I couldn't come. Right. I'm sorry for those of you that are
that's
on the
all
other
right.
side.
No, as long as you're honest, you didn't call her a name or anything. That's fine.
No.
Lauren, give a short disquisition on gender and polling, please.
Yeah, I could do this. I could do it all day. I will not, because Mark Halpern will get angry at me. Look, really quickly. So the CNN numbers, he sends me texts like, stop talking. We got CNN polling that did more of a gender break, and Trump is actually, 50% of white women, very, very similar to the 2016 numbers, are supporting Trump. So it's not just a gender divide, it's actually a gender and racial divide. Overall, women are more likely to be registered as Democrats, and they are also likely as independents to skew more, those who are registered independents to skew more Democrat. But right now, like, Trump is holding where he was in 16 and 20 with white women. So the question becomes two things: is turnout, and youth turnout, which is overwhelmingly, for Harris, and whether or not Black women, who are, the most likely to be registered to vote and are like 90% for Harris, how much they sway in places like Georgia. So it's generally, most polls are, get it pretty well in terms of the gender splits. They don't always report the gender numbers, but
right.
he's holding with white women. There's not been any real erosion of support there.
So Lauren, let me just ask one question. And so are you telling me that when they're doing the composition of the polling, there's the appropriate number as a percentage of women to men?
They usually try to do that. It depends.
Okay.
They do try to weight it, and if they don't get the exact number, they'll try to weight it. It's not, you have to check every poll. Some of them are crappy and don't do it, but most of the good polls now are pretty even.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Susie, how'd you find out about two-way?
Well, I've been with you since the beginning, but I think it was through YouTube.
All right. I screwed up everybody, so let's bring everybody back in. My colleagues will help with that. Susie, thank you for joining. Come back regularly. Hogan, I know you're used to being on cable, and therefore often find yourself as the only Republican with a whole panel of Democrats. But I brought you a former governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, Republican. a Republican congressman from Minnesota, Vin Weber. So you don't have to fight the whole thing yourself, although Vin has disappeared. Hopefully Vin will come back. Anyway, Governor, thank you for joining. Let's bring Jake in. Jake, new people here. There's Congressman Weber. Jake, some people don't know, so tell them where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, and how you groom that thing on your face, which looks spectacular.
It's not well groomed. I have a 14-month-old child, so the grooming is minimal, Mark. But yeah, thanks.
Looks good.
I appreciate that. I've been listening on YouTube, and my first time joining on two-way. I'm in the Bay Area in California, supporting Harris, although I have somewhat unorthodox political views. So I have a quick comment and then a question. My comment is I listened to last night's session, and then I almost didn't watch the Harris interview because I was worried it was going to be another interview that made me cringe, because I've largely agreed with the criticism of all the Harris interviews prior to this. But I watched it and I actually thought there were some new tidbits, and maybe you all are being a little bit hard on her last night. I was interested in the fact that she directly addressed how she wanted to incentivize local housing production using, tax incentives, or sorry, not tax incentives, but using federal funding incentives rather for local governments. Pretty directly answering the question around how do you balance steel production being owned by American companies versus jobs, and saying that, look, there's a national security reason why we need to sort of have this production. I thought she actually gave a few more tidbits that were direct than I'd seen before. So I was glad that I watched it. So that's just a quick comment, even though there were probably about 5 or 6 superfluous words in every sentence she uttered, which still irks me a little bit.
Jake, let me ask you something about after watching the interview. And again, I ask this without prejudice. Donald Trump, lower taxes, less regulation, more energy exploration. What would be, after watching that, what would you say would be the pillars of the Harris theory of the case on the economy?
Well, I don't know that I know the pillars, but I think the pieces that she emphasized are, one, I'm not talking about
the individual policies. I'm saying, what's her vision of how to be a good steward of a good economy? If Trump is lower taxes, less regulation, more energy production, what are hers?
Yeah,
what are
I
her
would
big
say
philosophical views?
Yeah, I would say she's clearly leaning in on this sort of how do you help people get a start, right? It's, the child tax credit, the, tax credits for new home buyers, new apprenticeship. She's clearly focusing on sort of a younger demographic of people who need support to sort of get their foot in the door in the economy. That's what I would sort of say.
Okay. All right. Jake,
I'll
what's
give
your
you one.
question,
Sorry,
please?
I hadn't thought through it. So I'm
That's all right.
Give you one.
That's all right. That's right. What's your question?
And then my question for you all is, I'm a lawyer by training, and I've been interested in the fact that even though there's been some reference here and there to the Supreme Court decision in Trump v. United States, I'm curious to hear people's views on why you don't think Democrats are spending more time trying to explain to people what the implications of that decision are, right? Which I think it will go down in the canon of one among the worst Supreme Court opinions ever written. I was quite shocked when I read it. I read almost all of the big Supreme Court opinions. And, I realize that for folks who are strongly on Trump's side, they don't believe that he breaks the law. But for a lot of undecided voters, I think there's a recognition that he, has broken the law in the past, even when he was not shielded with immunity. And the implication of this decision around immunity for official acts is pretty vast. And I mean, for me, quite frightening. And I feel like there's been very little attempt to explain what that decision means and what it sorts of, immunity that it would give Trump if he were elected again.
Yep.
So why is
Congressman,
that
Congressman, you're not a lawyer, right? Or are you?
No.
No. And Governor, you're
not
a
going to opine on the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah. And Governor, you're not a lawyer either, are you?
I've pretended to be one for 30 years, but I'm not one.
You don't have a law degree. So amazingly,
we all pretend to be lawyers in this business.
The only 2 elected officials who didn't go to Harvard or Yale Law School or get law degrees someplace else. I don't think any of us are lawyers. Anybody
well, I
here
do want to let
you know
the lawyers that have worked for me while I was governor pretended to be they gave me more political advice than legal advice. And I'd always go, I'm not paying you to give me political advice.
Yeah. So Jake, none of us remember.
My question isn't sort of about the opinion itself, but more wider.
I know. I know. Yeah, I know. I think the answer is because, first of all, Supreme Court decisions don't get that much coverage during a presidential year unless they directly pertain to something voters care about. And I think voters who care about the decision in the context of Trump already weren't going to vote for Trump. I don't think there's any Trump voter who said, well, now I can't vote for Trump because the Supreme Court has unshackled him. So it's really not kind of like a cutting issue the way of the abortion decision is. That one does get attention. And I think the other thing is it's still a little bit abstract, right? Because we still need to see how it gets applied, not only in his case, but in future cases. But to your question about if the prism I answer through rather than what is as to what ought to be, yeah, I think it's a big decision. I'm not sure I agree with you, and I'm not a lawyer, but I read a lot of opinions too. I'm not sure I agree with you that it was wrongly decided. I think it's a very tough case. I think some of the hypotheticals, the way they dealt with some of the hypotheticals was ridiculous, because I don't think they really addressed to say if the president ordered a hit on a political opponent, that they'd have immunity for that. Like, I don't think they drew the line in quite the right place in engaging with some of the hypotheticals. But I do think, Ben, one sec, I'll finish and come right to you. I do think that people who blithely say it's ridiculous to treat a president differently, that you can't have a king, the president should be above the law, I don't think that's right, because I do think you'd see presidents face all sorts of suits if they sent troops into military personnel into battle, if they ordered a strike settled. I mean, I think there's all sorts of things where they might face criminal charges that you can't shackle a president. The president is not a normal citizen when they're president, and so I do think that they balanced it wrong, but I do think finding a balance was the right thing to do. Congressman.
I just want to say, I think that's all right. I agree with you, Mark. I just think it's so interesting from a historical perspective. The Democrats, at least since Roosevelt, have been the party of a strong presidency. And the Republicans have been the party, rightly or wrongly, and I don't necessarily agree with my party on this, that says that we have to constrain the presidency. Now that's totally been flipped, at least it seems to me, by this Supreme Court decision. And I qualify that only by saying, as I did before, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand the decision entirely. But the notion that we want a strong executive was traditionally a very democratic idea.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Jake, how'd you find two-way? Yes, sir.
I'll give you a quick update on North Carolina information that Holmes are getting, if you'd like, or if not, we'll do it another night.
Yeah, I love that. Let's just get Jake back to his holding pen. Jake, how'd you find two-way?
I don't know. I've been watching for a while now. I think I may have found it from your Twitter, Mark, perhaps. But I've mostly been
are you remembering to invite your friends?
I have invited my friends. Yeah, my family as well.
All right, Jake. Thank you, man. Come back regularly. All right, let's go to our Charlotte correspondent. Governor, what do you got?
Well, first of all, we're having flooding in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Yeah. So there's not going to be a lot of campaigning during this weekend. Major flooding's coming our way and starting right now. Trump is working door to door. So it shows the Trump forces are on the ground, paid for by a super PAC, putting things on the door, which was a good sign for the Trump people. They were getting criticized for not doing it. The Harris campaign is sending out a lot of stuff saying, I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. Donald Trump is doing this. The abortion issue is in all the mailouts. So really playing that issue strong. Every commercial that you're seeing on TV, I've seen 3 in the last 5 minutes, are about Mark Robinson and Donald Trump. They're tying Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor, governor's candidate, to Donald Trump and to every other candidate. So,
Governor, what's going on?
Rather interesting.
Thank you for that. What's going on with your state and federal Republican electeds, some of whom called for Robinson to withdraw from the race? Not very many, some. Is that effort ended? In other words, are the ones who want him gone given up? Or are they still trying to get him to go publicly or privately?
None of them really say we want you gone. They're trying to hide. The congressional candidates are all hiding. They've all won. They're in gerrymandered districts, even the 28-year-olds who are walking into an office and we don't even know what their names are. The Senate candidates, we don't have any, but Senator Tillis has made pretty strong comments saying, you better prove it right now that you're innocent. And Bud, who is even doing that now, and Robinson ran ads for Bud in his U.S. Senate campaign. That's how powerful Mark Robinson was in the state. He ran very negative ads against me, and they were very untruthful ads, but they were very effective. That's how big a fall this is by a social media superstar that's falling just as hard as he rose, which is a danger
Hogan,
if no vetting.
Hogan, before you move, thank you, Governor. Hogan, before you move to the swamp, You lived in a Carolina.
Yeah.
What's your view of the current status of the peril Mark Robinson poses to your friend Donald Trump?
Well, my relatives still live in North Carolina, and of course, I worked for Elizabeth Dole when she was a senator from North Carolina. So I hope to move back there at some point. I was born in North Carolina.
By the way, Hogan, good seeing you, buddy. I haven't
You
seen you
too.
in a long time.
I know. I think the last time I gave a speech there, he was in the crowd. Actually, it was kind of surreal. But it blows my
Robinson,
mind.
focus.
Yeah, no, it
danger,
just blows my
danger,
mind.
Will Robinson.
If this guy had the meteoric rise of Mark Robinson was something we were all kind of shocked by, and we're proud of, to see this guy who was a really brilliant orator and so passionate. And I had to speak behind him one time at one of my speeches, and I was so mad they made me go after him, because he gets up there and he has the towel over his shoulder and he pats himself dry because he gets sweaty and he's like a fiery preacher. And now this scandal arises, and a lot of people I've spoken with in the state just don't believe any of it. They say they did the same thing to Trump, and it's Russia, and it's all a hoax. And some people are saying, wait a minute, hold on. He better actually tell me this is fake and prove it before he keeps just saying this around the state. So it's obvious it's a perilous situation for anyone running in the state of North Carolina when the person at the top of the ticket there faces such a real difficult challenge.
What do you think the Trump campaign's strategy is for dealing with him the rest of the way?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't think they were around each other. I don't think that he came to the event last time he was in North Carolina. So if that's any indication,
he actually for the past month, Trump has kept him off the stage. Both him and JD Vance. They knew something was coming. They were warned of it, and they've kept him off. Robinson bullied his way up on one stage. When the sheriffs were invited to the stage, Robinson walked up, and I knew it shocked Trump that he was there. So they knew for about, I think, 5 weeks, that there was trouble brewing, and the storm clouds were coming.
Well, and Whatley now runs the RNC, and he was head of the GOP in North Carolina. So he would obviously have inside information about what was percolating around the state.
Well, and I've directly said Whatley didn't do his job as North Carolina chairman by vetting this person. I'll say it flat out. I put a lot of this at the feet of Whatley, with all due respect.
Donald Trump famously called Mark Robinson Martin Luther King on steroids. He calls Hogan Gidley Stephen Miller on steroids. Little known fact. All right. I want to bring in two people at once. One's a renowned supporter of Donald Trump. One is a renowned supporter of Kamala Harris. I speak, of course, oops, did that wrong. Can't believe I did that wrong again. Oh, my goodness. All right, my colleagues will help us out. Michael Bix supports Kamala Harris. I've done this wrong yet again. Here comes Michael Bix. Here comes Bruce Director. Michael, tell folks who don't know where you are. Hold on, I got to unmute you. Go ahead, Michael.
I mean, in watching all the sort of hand-wringing...
Michael, I'm sorry. Michael, I'm sorry, you were unmuted. Just tell folks where you are. You're a Harris supporter, and you're in...
I'm in New Hampshire, and I'm a Harris...
All right, hold on. Yeah, hold on. And Bruce, tell folks where you are as a Trump supporter.
I'm in Loudoun County, Virginia, Leesburg particularly, and I'm a Trump supporter.
All right, I'm hoping you two, rather than asking a question, Michael, I'm hoping you two can have a good two-way colloquy about the race in front of us all. Have it out. What's on your minds that you could ask each other about?
Well, what I wanted to talk about, I mean, and I'd be interested in what Michael has to say, is to get back to Ukraine, because I think Trump is 100% right on it. I don't think what, Harris's ability to do the press conferences with, heads of state is the issue. The issue is that the Biden-Harris policy on Ukraine has been a failure and has been wrong all along, and Trump's been right about it. And I think that
Bruce, hold on. Bruce, hold on. Michael, what do you think, Michael?
Well, I mean, I disagree with that. I mean, I think, Ukraine's a democracy, and NATO, listen, it's not just the United States. All of NATO is behind them. I mean, why in the world is that a mistake? I mean, what you want?
Michael, let me just clarify, and then Bruce can come back. You think it's the right thing to do policy-wise? I know. Is it also good politics for her to be standing with Zelenskyy, championing America's role in supporting them, or not good politics?
I think so, because I think it hammers home how much sort of Trump really is half-baked about all this. You know, I mean, the notion that he can sit down with Putin on day one and like get a solution, it's like, that's fantasy. And I think the more that that's hammered home, because I mean, the problem she's got is people are scared that somehow a Black woman is not going to be commander-in-chief. And I think that underlying a lot of the stuff that's going on is this basically this racial fear, or not, I mean, they just look at her. And I think she has got to sort of hammer home how unglued Trump is about these kinds of things, because that is a way to make people a little more comfortable with pulling the lever for a Black woman, which I think, as much as people don't want to say it, that is a factor in what's going on when people start talking about, oh, she's not specific enough about the economy. I mean, she's more specific.
Bruce, is America ready to have a Black woman commander-in-chief?
Sure they are. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I don't have any problem with that, and most people I know, that's not the issue. The issue is that people are tired of the Washington consensus, which has led us into one forever war after another, and they've done it just again. And everything they say about it turns out not to be true. And then we get into these situations. I think somebody else mentioned that, you know, people are tired of having spent hundreds of billions of dollars and let this war happen. And now it just gets escalated and escalated and escalated. And that is a big issue throughout that's important to a lot of people in the country. They see people in Washington, and I'm talking about Republicans and Democrats as well, who blithely say, we got to defend democracy, we got to stand up against dictators, and they never pay the price for it. The price is paid by people who go to war, whose lives are ruined, and whose economies are destroyed. And this is a very strong issue, and I think Trump has a lot of resonance with people about this, because they want a president who's going to put an end to this. And when Trump was president, he did. And we didn't have that with Obama. We didn't have it with Bush. We didn't have it with Clinton. And we didn't have it with the first Bush. And every single one of those wars, I mean, practically, I guess you could say Grenada might have been a success. But did we win any of those wars after saying we have to do it? It's for democracy. We have to stand up against dictators. And it didn't work. And people are really fed up with it. I sound emotional about it because I'm really fed up with it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I like Trump.
Tens of millions of people agree with you, Bruce, but tens of millions agree with Michael too. Michael, what's your reply?
I was not saying that you would not vote for her because of her race. I'm just saying that underlying, I mean, is something that underlies some people's discomfort with her. And listen, we have no troops there. I mean, it's not like Iraq. I mean, and we have to stand behind our NATO allies, and they have to stand behind us. I mean, what does the United States stand for if it does not stand for basically standing up for a new democracy? I mean, like, what else are you going to fight for?
Well, it's a very complicated issue. If we want to litigate the whole thing, you have to go back a long way, including, you know, something like the Minsk Accords could have been accepted if the United States would have backed it. Early on in this conflict, there was an agreement, and, you know, Boris Johnson and the United States told Zelenskyy, don't do it because we're going to back you to the hilt and you'll win. And there was no reason whatsoever to dangle NATO membership over Ukraine when we know that's just even Henry Kissinger said that was crazy to do.
Bruce, let me ask you one question, and then I want to bring Sam in.
Okay.
In the debate, Donald Trump stunned a lot of people by declining to say that he hoped Ukraine won the war. Do you hope Ukraine wins the war?
I don't know what win the war means now. I mean, if
do you hope Putin is repudiated, whatever that means in terms of land, whatever? Do you hope that Ukraine militarily triumphs over Russia and is able to settle the war on highly favorable terms? Is that your hope or not?
I don't think that can happen.
But is it your hope? Would that be your preferred outcome?
My preferred outcome would be to end the killing, and that would be a win for Ukraine. And I think at this point, I think early on, you probably could have gotten a deal which didn't require giving up any territory except probably Crimea, but which is already gone. But, Biden has said that, at one point, overthrowing Putin and Zelenskyy has said this too, and, evicting Russia out of Crimea means winning the war. And if we're going to fight until those things are achieved, that escalates to nuclear war, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, Bruce, thank you. I want to thank you both, Michael. Also, I want to get Sam in just to get one more voice before we go. Sam, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
I am in the great state of Texas, and I have been somewhat unsure, but I've been looking for a reason to vote for Harris. But I think at this point, I made up my mind. I will be voting for Donald Trump.
Tell us why.
Well, I'll start by saying something that I said a few weeks ago. The last time I came on is I think the Harris campaign has done a really good job in keeping race as an off the table issue and going past that, because I think, as a young Black person, I the way I see it is we've come so far from where my parents were and their parents especially were in terms of race relations, that we ought to try to move beyond that. And I think they've done a good job in that. And I just wanted to, the reason I came on was to say that specifically to Michael and say, I understand that there's racism still is a huge problem. It's something that I've seen in my lifetime as well. But I just think we're at such a beautiful point in the history of the United States where we've come so far that it just takes away from the actual accomplishments of Kamala Harris and many Black leaders that we have to reduce disagreement to just purely race-based thing. I have a lot of agreement, especially in foreign policy, and that's what made me raise my hand. I have a lot of agreement in foreign policy and economic policy with Donald Trump, and that's why I'm voting for him. I think I'm very blessed to be able to be in a position where I can say no to voting for a possible Black president, because we've come so far. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Well said. Was there something that was pivotal for you in making your decision, or just the sort of a gradual over time?
I've just been kind of insulted by the types of appearances that Kamala Harris has had. I think she had been very effective as a senator when she, especially in the Kavanaugh hearings, as much as I kind of wavered back and forth between whether she was right or wrong. She's an effective communicator. She's an incredibly smart woman. And I don't know why the campaign has shortchanged us by putting, yesterday's interview really was what put me over the top to go to Stephanie Ruhle, of all people, who had defended her to the hilt like that on Bill Maher. I think just get in front of people that disagree and make those arguments. Make the arguments. Show how smart you are. Show how eloquent you are as a speaker, as she had done in the past. And it's just kind of insulting to not have that. And then from an economic standpoint, I just think I haven't really been able to get an idea of where exactly she stands, like what issues that are somewhat controversial that'll maybe piss off the left, the further people further left, further right. Does she really stand on? I haven't seen any of that conviction from her. So at this point, I'm just thinking economically, I think Donald Trump proved that he was a reasonable steward of the economy, and that's the way I'm going to vote.
Okay, Sam, one last question for you, and I want Lauren and Hogan to close us out by commenting on both Ukraine and what you said. Who are you going to vote for in the Senate race, and why?
I'll probably vote Democrat. I'll probably split my vote. I'm not a fan of Ted Cruz. I'm not a fan of old school Republican politics. I've only ever voted for Donald Trump. I wrote in Andrew Yang in the 2020 election, and I voted none of the above in 2016. So I'm just not a fan of the old school Republican Party.
So Sam, I'm so glad you came on for a bunch of reasons, including, people say, well, how could somebody vote for Donald Trump and against Ted Cruz and split their ticket like that? and you've enunciated it. And the notion that undecided voters are unicorns or people who are going to split their ticket don't exist. You've explained it well and clearly. And again, I think just add a lot of texture to understanding how it could be that Donald Trump could win your vote, but Ted Cruz could not. And we'll see that you're not in a battleground state, at least not yet. But I think your reasoning, a very reasonable reasoning and perspective, it reflects the views of a lot of people who are going to decide this election in those 7 states. So Sam, thank you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Come back regularly. Even though you're now a Trump supporter, we still want to hear from you, even though you're not undecided. All right, Hogan, first, comment on Sam and comment on Ukraine, because I know you wanted to do that.
I think Sam is a good representative of a lot of folks out there who are concerned about just the vapid, empty responses of Kamala Harris on any particular topic, filler words that don't really mean anything, dancing around, not answering questions. Politicians rarely answer questions, okay? I train them not to do that. But she gives really the listener nothing. And I think that's turning off folks. They're in a weird paradox or conundrum, if you will, because they want to put her out to show she can do those things. But when they put her out, she becomes less likable and there's more chances for a mistake. So they're kind of in a weird spot. But I have to say something about Ukraine, because obviously being in a Trump White House and Department of Defense was under my purview and bucket, et cetera. Foreign policy is obviously very tricky in a lot of ways. It's very nuanced. There's a lot of history involved, concerns, questions throughout the entire decision-making process. But, and I'm looking at this esteemed panel, and you got a bunch of young whippersnappers on here, but I'm old enough to remember when Zelenskyy was called a clown, a comedian, the whole country was corrupt. How dare our sitting president talk to Zelenskyy? And now all of a sudden he's Churchill. It blows my mind. But one of the reasons Zelenskyy was able to defend himself against Russia's initial wave in the first place is because it was Donald Trump that gave him the weaponry to do so. Remember, Barack Obama famously gave him blankets and pillows when he was looking for ammunition. So it was Donald Trump who did that. And unless he's changed his policy in the last little bit, of course, Donald Trump is not going to say publicly what he would do to broker a deal. He's not going to say who he wants to win or not, because if he's the one negotiating, it takes all of his leverage right off the table. He's been doing this, and he said that publicly many times. The fact is, under his administration, Ukraine was not in danger. Vladimir Putin said as much. He was concerned that Donald Trump was correct about maybe bombing him. Maybe he said 10%, but that's all I needed. I was a little concerned. And so you don't have to guess what would happen. There was peace all over the world. There were no wars in the Middle East. Ukraine was not under threat, and they weren't being occupied by Russia because Donald Trump didn't let that happen. And so
thank you, Hogan.
All this stuff
Thank
about one more quick thing. Yeah. Republicans, I understand too, they're asking a lot of questions. We're sending hundreds of billions of dollars into a war where the administration currently is giving us no playbook of how the thing's going to end at all, no off-ramp whatsoever. And we have our own citizens, our own veterans, our own poor people in the streets. You're giving that money to foreign nations and illegal aliens. A lot of people don't like that, and for good reason.
Yeah. Thank you, Hogan, as always, speaking for multitudes. Lauren, how do you feel listening to Sam say why he turned away from Kamala Harris?
I mean, it's always fascinating to hear how people make their decisions, and I appreciate him, being so forthright about it. It's very informative, and I think her campaign. I've been saying to lots of Democrats since we did our undecided focus group a few weeks ago, that's really important stuff to take seriously and to pay attention to, because we need those voters, and she has choices about how she runs her campaign in order to win them over. I'll just say, on Ukraine, it so pains me as I think about the blood and treasure, my grandfather, all of our grandfathers who sacrificed so much in Western Europe to preserve the world order, to preserve American values, to prevent foreign aggression against the nation, against sovereign nations. It's painful to me that so many Americans think that doesn't matter anymore. And for my friends in Poland, I think it's actually really interesting that the Polish Americans in Pennsylvania have come out to support Harris for that very reason. Because when you live it and it's your next door neighbor, you feel very differently about it than when it's on the other side of the world. If Canada was being invaded, if we had another Pearl Harbor, et cetera, I think most Americans would feel this much more acutely and more personally. I spent time in Ukraine right after the war broke out. And so that's really shaped my views. I think we're doing it right, but it's not our war. We can support them. as is the rest of Western Europe. We can build alliances to support them. But, you know, Biden's not, no one sent troops there. I'm not sure I even totally agree with that, but I want to see the world order preserved. I last night, just last side note, I'll stop because I know you want me to, but I was with Yulia Navalny last night, the wife of Alexei Navalny, whose husband was brutally murdered by Putin. And when you get a chance to hear up close and personal, the absolute depravity of Vladimir Putin, the idea that we could ever trust him on anything, be able to negotiate with him in good faith on anything is pretty hard to digest. And to see her face to face last night was like unforgettable, life altering experience to hear her talk about what it's like. And, you know, God forbid any of us ever have an experience like that. But we just have to remember there are real people whose real lives are at stake every day in these conflicts.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Hogan. Thank you, Nancy. And then, feel like it's romper room, but grateful to everybody. And Ray and Governor McCrory and Sam for his great question, and everybody else who asked questions. Very grateful to you. I love this episode. I learned a ton, and that's really what Two Ways for. It's for my personal edification. No, very grateful to everybody for your participation. And Sam, really, as I said, I think you shared memorably. Dan, also thank you. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the morning meeting. It is the last episode for now through the election for Tim Hogan, who's going off to do stuff that requires his attention. So we'll have a big reveal about who's going to take the Tim chair. Not an easy chair to fill. Tune in tomorrow and find out who's filling it. We'll also preview, amongst other things, Vice President Harris's trip to the border, Douglas, Arizona, and Donald Trump's Trump Tower meeting with Vladimir Zelenskyy. I wonder if there's an open press event that I'll feel compelled to go to because Trump Tower is less than 2 miles away from my home. Tune in to find out. I'll probably decide by the time of the morning meeting. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Have a great night. We'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the morning meeting.